something a little bit different. You've seen what the name of the piece is. It's a look back at some of our greatest players in an attempt to remind us of what we were and maybe what one day we can be again. This is a Premier League only 11. Not because I think football started then or anything silly like that, but mainly because of my age. I simply can't remember many games before that. I've picked what I think was our best 11 from the Premier League era, which was 1992 to 2001, and tried to somewhat create a coherent team. And then from players left, I've created our second best Premier League 11. I expect arguments and debate, in fact I welcome it. So, in our greatest Premier League 11, we start with the goalkeeper, and of course, it is Steve Ogrizovic. Very simple in the decision between him and Hedman. Who would you want in a relegation decider? A dirty, nasty, backs against the barbed wire swine of a game. Who would you want there? Countless last or almost last roll of the dice games, like Tottenham away twice, Wimbledon, Leeds at home, many more. He was there, a legend and an icon. And of course we only went down when he'd retired. So second place is the second easiest choice in this team, and that is Roland Nielsen. Smooth as fresh butter, impenetrable and unflappable. I looked at him, I also imagined he smelled lovely, like the sun rising against the islands of Stockholm or something. He also should have been given longer as a manager, but that's another story. On to our other fullback, and that is Richard Shaw. Now, Rico and Roland sounds like a terrible Austrian music act, but they're two very good fullbacks. And while Shaw wasn't exactly your most stylish player, he offered guts and heart and was probably underrated technically. I've had to play him at fullback to accommodate him, as our centre-backs are Phil Babb. So our first centre-back wasn't with us that long, but he always looked like he'd move on to big things. I can remember in the build-up to the World Cup, USA 94, my mates at school telling me that Roberto Baggio and Beppe Signori were going to embarrass Phil Babb and put 5 past the Republic of Ireland or something. Well, they didn't, and Babb and Paul McGrath defended like warriors and had superb World Cups. So up yours, Sam Wilkinson and Nathan Mastin. Alongside Babb is a very different breed of athlete, very competent player, and that's Paul Williams. Whenever I think of Willow, I envisage a man standing hunched over, mouth hanging open, looking like he was totally shattered, but still able to muster enough energy for a goal line clearance or a desperate hoof into the West Terrace. The guy was so hard that he could shin a 30-yarder for Christ's sake, and apparently he tried to drive Craig Bellamy into the floor in training, so he gets bonus marks for that. So on to the guts of the midfield, and arguably our greatest bargain buy ever. Well, until I come to another member of this midfield anyway, and that is George Boateng. An all-action enforcer who'd got more energy than British Gas, and didn't his price go up when he left us? He loved playing for us, and we loved him. It's just a shame he wasn't there longer. Partnering him in midfield is Gary McAllister, and I ummed and ahed with Mac whether to include him in this. In fact, I saw a recent Twitter poll of fans debating whether he was even a legend or not, and it was a fairly split decision. No one doubted his talent, but it was his injury record for us, and basically the fact that he had one decent season in 4 that left his place up for debate. Also, this midfield did play together, and it was a bit hit and miss, but then again it did deliver a 4-1 win at Villa Park, lest we forget. And also, who would you really put above him? Who else had his delivery at a dead ball, his range of passing, his fitness, his ball retention, and also his finishing? The third member of the midfield is the gem that is Peter Undlove. Bargain number 2 in the midfield. Nuddy was just explosive and unconventional, from the wing or as a deep-lying pacey danger man. Brilliant with the ball at his feet and scored some absolute beauties. Of course, this was at a time when there were a lot more journeymen in the Premier League, so it might have been easier for a player of his balance and speed to reduce pondering troll-like players to dust, but he was just an absolute treasure. Our final man in the midfield is Mustafa Hadji. We've got a fairly good record with Africans in our team, and I remember being just so excited when we signed him a year after the World Cup. Scored some great goals, such as the one against Arsenal after 178 passes or so. Attack, attack, attack for Coventry City with the commentary. Great technique, and part of that entertaining side of 1999-2000. A festival of football, if you will. Yep, awful. On to the attack. And if your 11 hasn't got the next guy in the team, I hereby exile you to Northampton for a year. The best player we've ever had in the Premier League, pound for pound. A clever, interesting striker who played so well with Roussel and McAllister and Carlton Palmer and so many others. So good to watch. Unpredictable, but at the same time assured. I'm very lucky to have seen him a handful of times that season, and he scored in every game I saw, including Villa, Watford, and a forgotten mini-classic against Sunderland. I still hope he'll come back when he's about 53 or something. And the final member of the team, and his strike partner, is Dion Dublin. Some people don't even recognise him as one of our legends. I know how he departed, which left a bitter taste in the mouth, but the best aerial striker we've ever had in the Premier League showed a lot of loyalty in the first 3 years with us, when he also could have moved, and we would have undoubtedly been relegated without him. Think how good that attack would have been, especially with Nuddy providing pace if you want to swap it about a little bit. And of course, Dublin was also a very decent centre-back as well. So, here's the full 11. I like it a lot, think it's a decent team. But now, let's wipe the slate clean and create a second 11. And based on who we've got in this first team, you can probably guess who's going to go into my second 11. So we start with Magnus Hedman. He just missed out to Oggy, but graded fractionally above Kirkland simply because of the number of games he played. He had great agility and bounce to him, pretty decent on crosses considering he wasn't the tallest, and he also has a son called Lancelot, which I like. Let's move on to the full-backs, and the first one is Brian Burrows. Bugsy won the FA Cup with us, without playing in the final of course, but was still a very adept player well into his 30s, making 474 appearances. Not many got past him, did they? And that's mainly due to his burst of pace, and his ability to control his part of the field without actually being noticed very much. Very decent crosser as well, of course. The other full-back is Marcus Hall, the only player on either team who's a Cov kid, with 270 appearances for the club across 2 periods. It's hard to think he played his first game in the 94-95 season, and his last in the 2009/10 season. Very decent, very reliable, and for that reason I don't think we'll be letting too many crosses past in this team. And even if we do, we've got this man in the centre of defence, Mo Konjic. I was at this Bosnian brute's debut against Blackburn in 1999, and right away we could see he'd got cult hero written all over his distinctive face. Tall, quite languid at times, easy to like, not terrible technically. I also have a soft spot for his part in our last ever game at Highfield Road when he played for Derby, and decided to turn in a performance uglier than roadworks on the M6. Finally, making up our defence, is Peter Atherton. Maybe one of our most underappreciated players. Part of the centre-back partnership that gave us our joint best ever Premier League finish in 93-94 of 11th. Okay, so him and Mo are hardly Maldini and Cannavaro, but it's functional and intimidating in looks, if nothing else. Also, I don't like Gary Breen, because he scored one of our most ridiculous own goals at Old Trafford, and also refused to talk to the Peterborough Telegraph when I worked there, so he didn't get in my team. On to midfield, let's have another enforcer. Lee Carsley was one guy who was less at fault when we were relegated than some of the others in the team. Of course, he had a couple of spells with us, tough as nails, knew how to finish as well. We needed him and Hartson from the start of that relegation season, and who knows if we'd stayed up if they'd both come earlier. I vote yes. So, I've had to tamper with formations to get the next guy in, but there's no way I could really leave him out, and that is Noel Whelan. Now, when he was let loose from Gordon Strachan's bunker, Snowy, so called because he was a cold killer with eyes like coal, I presume, was as good as it got in that division. Remember the mazy dribble against Southampton, the 10-foot high leg against Liverpool, and the Van Basten volley at Wimbledon? His best years were with us, and we thank him for it. Very technically gifted player. So, alongside him in midfield is Paul Telfer. It kind of says something in describing our second best team that Telfer gets in here. But in the end, I just couldn't find anyone better, really. Solarco, Eustace and Froggatt were all in my thinking. But for this team to work, I need work rate and consistency, and I think he's the best of that quartet, particularly in 97-98, when he was actually very good, weighed in with goals in our FA Cup run, and he never lacked desire, did he? The final midfielder is Youssef Chippo, a little overshadowed by Haji, but much more consistent and able to play in a greater range of positions. Who can forget that great strike in an absolute dog's dinner of a game against Leeds, arrowing into the top corner? In this secondary dream team, I can see him drifting in, supplying little passes and crosses, and maybe belting it 40 yards into the net every so often. Let's go on to the attack. And you know, it's 20 years this December since that goal against Manchester United. I remember watching coverage of that game on teletext, and it going from 2-1 to 3-2 in the blink of an eye because of a mad and beautiful goal from Darren Huckabee. Pace, power, finishing, offside 150 times a season, and scoring patches of great goals unlike any other player we had in the Premier League. Yes, he could be maddening, but players like him often are. He should have played for England, simple as that. And plus, I hear Gary Kelly's only just pulling his shorts the right way round now, after that rinsing at Ellen Road. Finally, our second attacker from the Premier League, and it's Mick Quinn. We've heard all the jokes, explosive over the first plateful, always had a stomach for a fight, and so on. But have we had a better finisher in the past 30 years? 17 goals in the first Premier League season, a hat-trick at Highbury, and still holds the record for 8 goals in the first 5 games in the Premier League, and would kill for someone like him now. So here we are, my second 11 to go alongside my first 11. Who would win? I've got to go for the first team, I guess, based on the remit of the video, but I actually really like the potential balance of the second team. And maybe you disagree. I haven't included Froggatt, or Thompson, or Eustace. I didn't have Chris Kirkland in goal. What about some of the players from the earlier years, like Sean Flynn, John Williams and Roy Wegerle, for example? If you disagree, let me know on Twitter or Facebook. In the next month or so, I'm also going to be doing exactly the same with the Championship and League One. So keep an eye out on Football Rants and let me know what you think.